Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone is back from the coffee break. We shall start the session now, since we are running out of time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce our last speaker for the day. Our last speaker for the day is the Global Head of Core Banking at HSBC. With an immense passion for human technology, he likes to indulge into confluence of different streams of knowledge and technology. In his current role at HSBC, he is accountable for all the core banking systems and platforms within HSBC globally. He is also responsible for implementing DevOps and agile practices in core banking in HSBC, including legacy systems. Under his leadership, HSBC has become the first financial institution in the world to have cracked the end-to-end DevOps automation on I-Series. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, we cannot complete a journey without measurement. Metrics in DevOps is the topic that is being touched upon by this speaker, how they're different from waterfall model, their importance, and also industry trends on those metrics. So let's raise our hands once again and clap for our last speaker for the day, Mr. Ketan Vanjara, Global Head of Core Banking at HSBC. Welcome, sir.
Thanks very much. Am I audible? Am I audible? Right at the back? Can you see? Hear me? Good, thanks. Thanks very much, and apologies. Why do I start with an apology? Because I'm the only, probably the most severe villain between you and your families on a Sunday evening, right? So I will try to complete this session as quickly as possible. That's my organization's security policies, don't worry. So if I don't fiddle with the machine for a while, it just locks itself. Okay, so I was asked to talk about metrics in DevOps, but before I get to that, I thought because it's the last session, it might be worthwhile. I mean, usually a session ends with questions. Why not I start with questions myself? So how many of you know what DevOps is? Gosh, looks like I have to start all over again, is it? Not many hands going up. And this is not after lunch, so I don't think you'll be feeling so lazy either, right? So can anybody kind of make some statement? What is DevOps? Can somebody tell me? Given that we've gone through a session, yes? People, process, and tools, okay? Working together cohesively, and excellent. But that happened in the waterfall world as well, right? That happened 30 years ago also, or 50 years ago also. What's the difference? Speed to the market, excellent, okay. Better quality, all right. What else? That's agile, but isn't it? Continuous collaboration, continuous integration, okay. What is continuous integration? To integrate all the team members, okay. Anybody else? This table is winning, by the way. Other tables? Yeah? Go ahead. And by the way, there is no right or wrong answer, don't worry. Like any other thing in IT industry, software is all soft, right? You can't really have, though it's all binary, most of the concepts in our industry have a spectrum, right? So it kind of starts from 0 to 1, but there's a lot of point or decimal numbers in between. So any other thoughts? Excellent. All right. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Good. Orchestration of tools. Any other thoughts from the backbenchers? Usually the backbenchers are the smartest ones, I'm told. I used to be one of them, by the way. So that's why I call them smart ones, you know. So anyway, any thoughts from you guys there? None? Feeling really tired? Want to run home? Okay. So what is the word DevOps? How did that word come upon? How did you come on the word DevOps? What does that word mean? How did it evolve? Any thoughts? Development and operations teams, exactly, right? So before I jump into metrics, and by the way, I don't have too many slides, so if you don't interact, depending on how you look at it, good for me, good for you, or bad for me, bad for you, right? So because I usually feel that knowledge can be exchanged. I am not here to teach anything. I don't claim to be knowing more than any one of you. I'm here to exchange thoughts, and that can happen only if we exchange. If it is a one-way monologue, it won't be really interesting for you. I can really make you go sleep, or I won't learn anything in the process either, right? So probably have about 8 or 9 slides, not many, to just set the expectations. I would like it to be more interactive, where people may, all of you, the participants, may share your thoughts. Not necessarily only ask questions. You may have some ideas also. Feel free, and we can have a good discussion around those ideas as well, right? So essentially, if you look at it, this is DevOps. Right? Don't know if you have seen. Unfortunately, I was not there for the whole day. So if you come across any of my slides which you've already seen, let me know. I'll skip. Right? No point in kind of duplicating the effort. So as you can see, it is development. Now, development usually wants more and more change, because that's what software development is all about. We want to introduce more features, more functionality, provide more features to our users. That's what development is all about, right? However, if you look at the operations side of things, they want more stability. Why do they want more stability? Because if you look at the world in which we are today, we actually live in a 24/7 by 365 world, where we are just not allowed to have any disruption in our services to our customers. So be it a search page like Google, or be it a banking software that we build, or be it any of the entertainment, even something like Netflix, which is primarily entertainment, right? There was a time 5, 10, 15 years ago when if entertainment had some degree of disruption, we were tolerant. But now, how many of you have Netflix on your mobile devices? Please raise your hand high up so I can see. Very few. How many of you have Amazon on your mobile devices? Quite a few. Very good, Chilo. So we have something in common. So if you were trying to shop something on your device on Amazon, and for some reason the app stopped working, how many of you would be tolerant of that? I'm not saying happy at all. You would say, okay, that's fine, I'll shop later. How many? 1, 2, 3. So when I said how many have the apps on your mobile devices, probably 30, 40 hands went up. When I said how many of you will be tolerant, only 4 or 5 hands went up, right? So 75 to 80% of the population is not tolerant to even have a disruption in a shopping experience. Those of you who are using Netflix, or I have friends, or more so I would say my daughter and her friends, they wouldn't want to have an interruption even on the Netflix streaming whenever they're watching a movie. That is the extent to which the modern generation, the next generation, is becoming more and more impatient in terms of their consumption, and more intolerant in terms of disruption to their consumption, right? That is what brings us to the DevOps world. Now, therefore, stability becomes very important, because if you keep on changing, the history of our industry has not been that great, to be very honest, right? Especially even, I presume most of you are from the software sector. So are we known to have built software without defects? Anybody who can claim that he or she knows somebody, either you have done it yourself or you know somebody who has built software without defects? Not a single hand going up. Shows us about our credibility, right? Unfortunate, but true, right? Therefore, the ops guys, when you look at them, they say that, well, guys, if you keep making changes, my worry is you will introduce more and more defects. That will interrupt services which our consumers don't want, and therefore I want stability. Now, on the face of it, these two seem quite conflicting. That you want more change, but change introduces defects, and operations wants more stability because they don't want defects, and therefore it's contradictory. That contradiction is what is being resolved by DevOps. One more question. How many of you have worked on mainframes, I-series in 80s, 90s? Oh, there's one hand going up. Oh, I have only one friend here, sorry. No worries. So, if you worked on them 20 years ago, how many of you worked in the industry before 20 years? Any hands? Okay, so you haven't seen that industry at all. The industry actually used to operate on DevOps 25 years ago, just so that you're aware. In the mainframe world of those days, when I started my career, we actually were working DevOps. So what exactly does DevOps mean? Let's go and look at the model. And some of it you might have already probably seen it, but I want to repeat it only from a view that probably I might be able to give some additional perspectives to it, right? In addition to whatever the speakers before me, my esteemed colleagues would have already told you. So what it means is when you design the whole machinery to operate on a DevOps model, the idea is that we all work together. So today, if you look at IT industry, we typically have a project manager, a developer, a tester, a release manager, a quality engineer. I mean, there are different roles that people play, and there are different functions that we have in the organization to play those roles. And typically, a software development passes through all those stages, what was erstwhile known as a waterfall model as well. But if we go before the days of Pressman, the guy who wrote those fantastic software engineering books that gave us all the different software engineering models, it was more about a team working together. So when I started my career, there was no function called testing in those days. A developer used to write some lines of code, would test it out, would punch it on the cards, which probably most of you wouldn't have seen, would run that on the tapes of mainframes, and if it runs, great. If it doesn't, you'd go back, he would modify some line of code, and that's how it would work. The same developer doing the entire job end-to-end, writing the code. The only extra thing they had was that they used to have punch card operators, because punching a card used to be a deft finger skill. So they would have punch card operators who would punch it. Sometimes they would make a mistake, which the developer had to correct, and the developer could actually, even today, can read a punch card as is, based on the punches that are made in there, as to what does that line mean, right? So this developer was supposed to ensure the quality of the punching on the punch card, run the punch card on the punching reader, or the punch card reader, run the code, see the output, take the printout, make sure it's right, and that was one developer doing everything end-to-end. Essentially a DevOps model. It's just that we didn't call it DevOps in those days, right? However, as the industry grew, we grew in complexity, and therefore it was required to have separate functions focusing on separate areas, right? So once the mainframes became PaaS, the client-server technologies came in, the web technologies came in, and now we have mobile technologies around us, in which there's so much happening that we obviously can't have one person doing everything. And therefore, the world started splitting itself into multiple functions of PM, dev, test, release, etc., etc., etc. Now, by the way, I'll not read the slides, so my whole idea is that I want to give you a little of multimedia experience, so you keep viewing what's in there, and I'll keep talking. So please keep watching those. I won't read them, just kind of one quick caution on that. So these are different tools that came up as well as we moved along in the industry, right? Now let me pause here and give all of you an example of manufacturing. Anybody over here from the manufacturing sector? One person? Anybody having experience of manufacturing sector? Not many. Okay, there's one person out there. So all of you know how cars get manufactured, right? Broadly, assembly line, right? But 30 years ago, how were cars manufactured? 30, 40 years ago. It was discrete manufacturing. So you would pick up a particular engine, for instance, or a chassis, as they call it in an automobile, right? And start building on top of that. The entire workforce would build that. There was no assembly line, by the way, in those days. And they would build the whole car, ready for shipping out. They'd start another one. And there would be probably 50 teams or 100 teams. If you take Pune happens to be an automobile capital of the country at least, because we have a lot of automobile plants around here. So you ask any of them who were 30, 40 years ago, they would have this discrete manufacturing. So you would basically manufacture one piece by one piece, or at the most batch by batch. If it was two-wheelers, they would probably have a batch of 10 or 20 or 30. And as a result, they would have 2-3 problems. One is that they could manufacture only as many vehicles per month. The capacity was limited by the skilled workforce you had. There was very little automation happening in those days. The second is there used to be quality issues because there was a lot of manual intervention as well. The processes were primarily manual. So there used to be quality issues. So the gentleman here said, talked about speed to market, quality, all of those things happened in that sector. So let's pause that sector for a moment. Now let's move to the other sector, again in manufacturing, of chemicals manufacturing or dairy products or any of those kinds of industries, where the manufacturing process is a continuous manufacturing process, right? So chemicals keep flowing in to the pipe at one end, and then manufactured chemicals, whatever they are after the reactions, keep flowing out of the pipe from the other end, and that is true blue CI/CD, right? Now, by the way, automobiles have also adopted the same methods, and they have also moved towards assembly line, the CI/CD and all that, and therefore, one, the Volkswagen plant outside Pune, just about 20-30 kilometers from here, I understand they manufacture close to some 3,000 vehicles per month. That's approximately 10 vehicles per day, right? And with a workforce of less than 2,000 employees, which was unimaginable, say, 25 years ago. So tremendous amount of automation, a lot of robotics, a lot of process rationalization, and getting the people dimension right in terms of the skill sets of the people, in terms of getting the team size and the team composition right, is what has given them. They don't call it DevOps, but essentially they have also moved to the DevOps journey. The reason I gave these couple of examples is that quite often when we talk of DevOps in a relatively ambiguous soft world of software, it becomes a bit difficult to grapple with it. I've experienced that in my own teams, say a couple of years ago. And when we started giving them these examples of manufacturing, it was very quick to understand that, well, okay, this is what it means, now I understand. So therefore, now taking those examples or analogies into the software world, as you can see here, the right-hand bottom corner, there are lots of tools that I have mentioned, and in fact, next slide has many more. I'll come to that in a moment. Where a lot of automation has happened in our industry, right? Right from actually, to some extent, I would say auto-filling of the code to unit testing and beyond. Most of the things we are able to automate to a large extent. Therefore, automation is there. The second part is processes, and the third part is people. So as the gentleman here said, that it is people, process, or the people, process, and technology, or tooling. So we'll talk about those three, and we'll talk about metrics as well. A little bit about some of the companies as to what DevOps means. So I gave the example of the first two. So as you can see, these are the dimensions. Again, there are a host of metrics around DevOps. I'll just share a sample of them with you, a smaller set, which we found very useful. But if you look at these organizations, right, they all have done wonders adopting DevOps. So be it Netflix, right, the amount of changes they make, and in fact, for the want of time and content, I haven't put too many slides, but they are introducing hundreds of changes per person, which means per staff they have in their organization, right, on a weekly basis, by the way. So that's the extent of efficiency they are able to gain in Netflix. Look at Amazon, obviously, they are making very frequent code changes, and yet, so if you look at all of these organizations, the one question I would ask, we talked about the dev and ops bit, right, is which of these, especially I know all of us would have used Amazon, Google, and Facebook. We probably may not have used Netflix or Etsy and others. When have you ever seen, experienced, or heard someone else experiencing outage in these three services, Amazon, Google, and Facebook? Anybody heard of that ever? Ever, even once in the last 8, 10, 12 years they have been around? Any outages in these three services? Yes, tell me. Sorry? Gmail was impacted for a bit, that's right, correct. Facebook as well, yes, once. Sorry, who else?
In US?
Amazon had an issue in US of what? It was not an outage. Their website, the Amazon.com where you shop, was not having an outage. AWS, yes, I agree. Right? So if you look at these companies, for the last 10, 15 years they've been around, we are able to remember their outages by in terms of year, month, maybe date also, because it happened once in their entire life or twice in their entire life, right? Versus, there are many other software that you use, and I'm sure you'll be facing more outages on those ones compared to these ones, right? So the industry is now becoming, I would say, having no outage is now becoming a default standard. If you are planning for any outages, then the users are not going to be patient, as I said, right? They'll just move on. So these are some of the metrics that many organizations use. And what we have found also in our organization, as we implemented DevOps over the last 1.5, 2 years, is that these actually make the most impact. So the first one happens to be deployment frequency. So as I said, that we want to add more and more features to our products, to our software now than ever before. Most of you would have observed that how often do the apps on your mobile devices update themselves? Typically? How often do your apps update themselves on your mobile devices? Monthly? Quarterly? Weekly? Right? Many of them actually update daily as well, without our knowledge. Right? You're sleeping and they just keep on going update themselves. Right? So that is the frequency. Even if you take weekly, every week you are adding more and more features. Now, imagine the software that you are working on, whatever software you are developing. Will you be able to deploy that software every week on millions of devices without any defect or outage? That is the question we need to ask ourselves. That is what DevOps enables us to do. And therefore, that becomes an important metric for us to track, to aim for, as to how can we improve the frequency of our releases. Now, all software may not be required to be changed every week or every day. That's fine. But you should be able to do that. The idea here is to enable the business that we serve, or the business we are in, to drive as many. So for instance, if I take the example of banking, the industry that I belong to, in banking, we have the requirement of responding to markets as quickly as possible. So all of you might be aware that interest rates keep changing, right? Now, as a customer, let us say you are a customer of a bank, and you have taken a loan from a bank, and the interest rates drop. Would you expect the interest rate on your loan, provided it is of course linked, it is a dynamic interest rate, not a fixed interest rate, would you expect the interest rate on your loan also to drop almost the same day or the next day? Yes or no? Right? But imagine if my software can't allow to do that. It takes 3 months to introduce that change. What will you be, a happy customer or unhappy customer? Happy? He moved the bank. Right? That's what happens. These are all true stories. That's why I say, I mentioned interest rate goes down. All right. Well, it's not a matter of SBI or India or anything. It's just a matter of, are you getting what you want? Right? Your behavior wouldn't have been different if Citi used to treat you the same way in the US. Right? Doesn't matter at all. The most important thing is that does the customer get what he or she wants? If you don't get it, then you're going to move on. You go to somebody else. And people do transfer loans. Banks do lose customers, right? So that is the frequency part of it. It's that the software has to be ready to make any such change in the event of requirements. Now, in a standard operating environment, a banking software does not require to change every day. But when it requires to change, it has to change immediately. You can't wait for 3 months and tell the customers that, oh my God, yeah, our software is still getting ready. The next metric is lead time for change, which also in a way I covered in my first example, right? That how long does it take you to introduce change? There are many, many organizations which still have a lot of legacy systems and therefore have this constraint that we can make a change, probably it takes about a month, 2 months, 3 months. Waterfall was all about that, right? That typically you take 6 months, 1-year projects, sometimes 3-year projects. It doesn't work anymore. It has to be smaller bits at a faster rate than large boulders at a slower rate. That's the movement that is happening from waterfall to DevOps, right? So how soon, and again, I have given some indicators, so I'm not reading through them again. I suppose all of you have the displays close enough to be able to read it, right? Are you okay if I don't read it? Okay, so silence gives me consent that I'm okay not reading. So I've given some indicators of what typically high performers do, what are the medium performers, and who are the low performers, right, on the same metric. So if you look at the deployment frequency, the high performers are on demand, quite often daily, quite often multiple deployments per day. That's the frequency. Versus the low performers can be anywhere from once per month to once every 6 months. Right? So there are indicators, again, it's more of providing a spectrum, a range of metrics that you will find in industry on those particular, or range of measures you will find on those metrics, right? The third thing, which is important, so first two, deployment frequency and lead time for change, are the dev side of DevOps, the change side of DevOps, right? The next one, mean time to recover, is the ops side of DevOps. Because as I mentioned in my first slide, that ops wants more stability. Now the problem is, we are still living in a dynamic world. There is a problem, there could be a problem. Gmail did break once, Facebook did break once, AWS was not available. Then the question arises as to, what is my mean time to recover? Can I recover and reinstate the service very fast? Or, there was a recent example in India, I think last week itself, yes. Did you read? The National Stock Exchange going down? How many? How many of you know about that? Okay, I don't know what's happening to this side of the table, guys. Wake up. So, and how many hours was it down? 3 hours, right? Does anyone of you trade on NSE? There is one hand. How was the experience? Speak up. Oh, you were not trading at that time. Lucky you. So, but imagine a stock exchange going down for 3 hours, right? And then, when it was even funnier, when somebody asked them, when the media asked them, okay, why didn't you kick off your DR? Because we all, especially the financial institutions, have fantastic disaster recovery and business condition, the BCPs and all of those things, right? And the question was, like, why didn't you trigger the BCP? And the response was even funnier, where they said that, well, BCP would have taken 6 hours, right? I don't know if anyone of you read those news, right? And I was traveling and I was feeling like, my gosh, right? What kind of BCP and DR are we talking about? And I'm sure they, and not only they, it just happens to be NSC, the incident happened as recently as last week, but this happens in many other institutions as well, right? That things go out. Now imagine Google search not being available for 3 hours, somebody asking Google that, hey, why didn't you trigger BCP? And they say, actually, you know what, BCP would have taken me 6 hours, right? So even by the way, a search engine not being available 6 hours is not going to cost us money. NSE not being available for 3 hours would have cost many people money. So quite often I ask these questions, that what do you think is more critical, Google availability or financial software availability? So far I have never got an answer, Google availability. Yet the search page is available far more in terms of their availability than many of these financial software. And the reason is that many of these systems are still either legacy from a technology standpoint, or legacy from an architectural standpoint, or legacy from a framework or software engineering model standpoint, or most important, legacy from a mindset standpoint, right? And I'll come to that in a moment. So coming to the MTTR, that's what it means, that how soon can you restore or recover from an outage your services. The next is change failure rate, which is again an operations side of metric from a stability perspective. We introduce change and something comes crumbling down. How often does change fail, right? And how often are we introducing change into production that fails? Again, if the failure rate is high, it means that our DevOps machinery or DevOps model is not well implemented, because typically the industry pattern and study and research suggests that if we have implemented DevOps well, then we would be doing good in all of these metrics. right? That we would be releasing change at a higher frequency. We would be having a much faster recovery. Our lead time to change would be very, very less because the frequency of change is high. And every time we introduce change, it will succeed. It will just go smoothly and seamlessly into production without any impact, right? The next is service availability. The mean time to recover and availability are kind of joined up metrics, I would say. They kind of go hand in hand. If your availability is high, then your mean time to recover usually is not required at all, and therefore it will be always high, better, right? And again, as I said, the world is moving towards, the last I heard was 99.999. I would be surprised if somebody amongst you says, no, it is now 4 nines after decimal. That's what the world, and that last 0.00001 or whatever that 6 sigma 1 is left just because, just in case. Usually, it is more of, if I take the mathematical example, is more tending towards 100%, right? There is no more that 99.9% and all that availability granted anymore. Or, I'll also give you the examples of, all of you would have heard of SLAs, right? Heard of SLAs? What's that? Service level agreements. What are those? Can somebody give an example? Go ahead, yes, speak loud. Estimate between the, what is the agreement? But what exactly is an agreement? Expectation of customer, managing the expectation. Can be more precise. Has anybody walked into a branch? Somebody made a State Bank. Have you walked into a State Bank branch by any chance? They put SLAs in the notice in one of their boards there. Can you give an example of SLA? What is an SLA? So one is 99, giving 99.99 availability of internet in the BPO organization. Any other relatively simpler examples of SLAs? Accident resolution, demand draft, yes. So when you walk into State Bank, they usually have this SLA which says that you should be able to get demand draft within 6 minutes, I think, right? Or 5 minutes. 15 minutes, okay, sorry, my expectation is higher. 15 minutes, right? That's an SLA. The question that we have today in the DevOps world is, do you really have an SLA unless there is a physical movement of something happening? So if you buy something on Amazon, there would be an SLA. It will be shipped to you in 2 days or 3 days or same day, depending on the delivery option you select and the price you pay. Because there's a physical movement of some material happening. Other than that, or Domino's Pizza is another one, very good example, yes. Other than that, when physical movement of goods is not happening, do you think we live in a world that allows any SLAs whatsoever? Right? Amazon says, well, the SLA for loading my home page is 2 seconds. Do we live in that world? That world used to exist 10 years ago, by the way. Right? People used to have those kinds of metrics that web page should load in these many seconds or microseconds or whatever. Today it is instant. So one of the things I want to also remind all of you, and that is where the whole service availability thing comes in, is that we live in a post-SLA world. So your organizations, if they are talking of SLAs, please go back and educate them that your customers don't live in an SLA world. My daughter does not know what is an SLA. Right? She just graduated. She does not know what is an SLA. When I talk to her about SLA, she rightly so considers me from the old world, right? Because I am from the old world, in a way, being her father. So otherwise, that generation does not live in SLA world. There are no SLAs for them. The only thing they can wait for, and that too not for too long, is delivery of physical goods. That's it. All services have to be available instantaneously. Therefore, they don't visit a branch. They don't ask for a demand draft. They do it on their handheld. They transfer the money. And it has to be instant. If you say, and therefore now the governments of the countries, including the Indian government, so if you know the money transfer that used to take place, say, a few years ago, what was the allowance? What was the SLA? Sorry? What was the SLA for transferring money 10 years ago on the internet? 2 to 3 days. What's the SLA now? What is the mandatory, regulatory SLA from the Reserve Bank? Sorry? 24 hours? No? Half a day? No? 45 minutes. And they are now moving towards instant payments. Right? So the SLA now is 45. Well, there are two slabs. One is 45, another is 2 hours. Right? If you try making those payments, you realize that. But now they are asking all the banks, that's how I come to know of it, that you have to move towards instant payment gateways. Because they realize that the next generation that's coming up does not have any time to wait for 45 minutes or 2 hours for money to be transferred. Right? So we are living in a post-SLA world. Therefore, service availability becomes an extremely key metric, an indicator of whether the security kicks in again. Whether the service is available or not. The last two are quality and cost. Again, quality is something that gets impacted positively through DevOps if done properly. And actually, there are enough evidences, enough research that even from a cost perspective, we actually would spend less money to develop the software and introduce those changes than we do in the older world of monolithic systems. So I have just one slide each on tooling. I just thought I'll share with you a set of tools that work on different technology stacks. So as you all would be aware that typically there are 3 or 4 different technology stacks, if I may call it. And each stack requires a certain set of tools from an assembly line automation perspective. So this is how the whole continuous cycle keeps going on. So right from continuous requirements actually, to continuous development, to continuous testing, integration, deployment. I mean, it kind of, there are, depending on which book you pick, it can range anywhere from 4 continuous to 6 continuous, but roughly in that range. The idea being that each cycle continues, and the idea being that it is completely automated, just like on the assembly line, right? Nobody has to wait for anybody. And if at all somebody has to wait, it means that the assembly line is broken there. You have to quickly fix it and get the line going. Otherwise, it will impact the entire productivity. The next is more about the processes. This part I'm sure most of you would be aware of because the industry has been using Agile and Kanban and all that for many, many years now. It is not as new, if I may call it, as DevOps is, right? But by the way, these frameworks and processes play hand in hand with DevOps, right? You can't have DevOps without adopting one or more of these frameworks, right? Call it Agile, call it Kanban, call it anything else. There are numerous other frameworks as well. Most of the time, Agile with Scrum and Kanban are the most popular ones, and they tie in very well with what we're trying to do with DevOps. Finally, people. So I gave you an example at the beginning itself of the mainframe world, where one person used to do everything end-to-end. He or she was playing the DevOps role. Now, in those days, there was one machine called a mainframe, and there was one language called COBOL or assembler or Fortran, any one of those, right? And therefore, it was possible to do all of those things end-to-end by one person because it didn't require numerous things to be known. However, we today live in a much more complex world where quite often our systems run on disparate technology stacks, right? If I give the example of banking, while the app that you access on your mobile device is a mobile app, it probably is traversing through some of the middle tier, which was built maybe 10, 15 years ago, which has middle layer, the middle tier, the business layer, business logic, all of that. And probably the back end still accesses data on mainframes or I-series machines and stuff like that. So all technology stacks coming together to fulfill one transaction of a user. So there would be numerous technology stacks. There would be numerous tools in those technology stacks, and therefore to expect one individual to know all of it end to end is asking for God. And we know that software industry people are not gods, right? We're human beings. Therefore, we need to have a group of people that is self-contained and has all the knowledge required to fulfill that feature or that transaction. Typically, the industry calls them pods, or they are also called as feature teams. And they are organized on the features of a product, most often, occasionally they are also organized on the slice of a project or a particular transaction. So depending on how you look at it, they could be organized on a product vertically, or they could be organized on a project horizontally. More often than not, I have seen them organized on products, because most of the companies that I give the examples of, be it Amazon, Netflix, Google, etc., or Microsoft as well for that matter, I have seen those being adopted more as product feature teams. So for instance, if I give the example of Office, right, Word or Excel that we all use, then cut, copy, paste, the most often used features, could be a set of features that are owned by a feature team end to end, which means any changes to those features are done by that team, tested by the same team, released by the same team, and supported by the same team as well, just in case something goes wrong, right? So that is how these teams are organized to make them self-sufficient, self-contained. Finally, what's the path to become a high performer in the DevOps world? So the old world, as I said, consisted of all of these different layers with multiple handoffs. While the new world, the people are organized. So typically, if you look at the old world, the waterfall world, or even the way, it's not necessarily just the waterfall model, the way in which we used to work, or we still work, many of us today, right? An engineer has a doubt. He or she would go to a business analyst, or a systems analyst actually first, who in turn might go to a business analyst, who in turn might go to the business, who in turn might go to the user, and then the whole thing kind of keep traveling back. So there are 5 layers forward and 5 layers backward. So as a result of that, do you think communication really maintains the exact thread all through the journey of 10 layers? Is it possible? Yes or no? No, right? So therefore, now the idea is that bring those 5 layers, if I may call it, together on a single table, a round table, and have all of them discuss things together. And that essentially what DevOps model gives us, right? And therefore we get all the benefits from that model. There are some challenges. So this is the last slide, but I'll stay here only. The challenges are several. First challenge is to identify and determine the tool stack that will ensure the CI/CD. Second challenge, of course, determine the metrics and what are your target measures against those metrics. Not everybody has to be releasing everything every day, as I said, right? There's also a challenge of rationalizing processes, right? They have to all work together and they have to orchestrate very well. You can't have, so example, again, if I take the same automobile example, right? Let us say if the chassis is coming at the rate of 1 chassis per hour, but the body on the car is arriving at the rate of 1.5 bodies per hour. Would that work? It won't. In software industry, many of our processes are broken. We are ISO, we are CMM, we are all of that, but our processes are not ensuring that everything is happening at the right rate throughout the assembly line. So that itself is also a challenge. So you have a challenge of the tool set, challenge of processes, and people challenge, because I'm so used to working as a developer or a tester and having that mindset for many, many years. Now you're coming and asking me to change it and work slightly differently as a team. I'm so used to having a layered approach versus now you're asking me to sit on the same table with others. These require behavioral changes. And this incidentally happens to be the toughest of changes. It's a change of mindsets, right? We as human beings, we like change so long as it happens to others, right? The moment it happens to me, I want to be a bit comfortable. I'm not very comfortable with change. And we have all of those comfort zones around us. And especially if we have been doing certain things certain ways for 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, even harder. Typically, they say that if you've been doing something for 3 weeks, getting into that in the 4th week becomes very difficult. In our industry, we're doing some of these things for many, many years, right? So minds, in fact, we have done various surveys in our own organization. I have read various researches on the net and interacted with quite a few experts. And one single thing that has come in commonly from almost all of them as to what's the biggest hurdle to DevOps, the answer has been mindset. So if the teams don't have the right mindset, if the managers don't have the right mindset, you can do the best of tooling, the best of processes, it is our best of metrics, it will be just as good as the people running it, right? So that's broadly what I wanted to share. I want about 15, 16 minutes left still. So as I said, I would want it to be more interactive. Any thoughts? Please don't limit yourself to questions. You may have your thoughts to share as well. Feel free. Yes, gentlemen there. Can we have mic there, please?
Yeah, thank you for the nice session. So I have a question. You talked about the feature team, where you said that group of people with all type of knowledges. So what is your thought about integrating everything? Because it might be that I am having the copy-paste things that which I have built, but how I will ensure that my copy-paste thing is not impacting which is which is already there, because there might be 100 teams who are building the 100 functionalities.
Yeah, good question. So the tool set along with processes largely ensures that. So in this case, if I just draw an example, I wish I had that slide with me, but imagine your code is, I mean, all of us are aware of the trunk and the branching of the code, right? The way Git manages its code, right? So if you have a main trunk of your code, that code is sacrosanct, right? It is a code that is working, it is in production. Now, when you do kind of forward and backward integration of that code, basically branching it out, then integrating back in, you take a slice of that code, in your case, let's say the copy-paste code, you modify it, and now you're going to reintroduce that code into the trunk before it releases into production. That's how normally the flow happens. Now, in that flow, the moment your changed code is ready, it is automatically, that is where the tooling comes in. So there is a lot of design that goes into the whole tooling and process aspect as well to ensure that nothing breaks. So when you are ready with your code, all the subsequent steps, including the various use cases and scenarios in which your feature is getting used, get tested along with the submissions of all the other developers as well. Because everybody is writing code every day. And there are test batches, if I may call it, right, running on those codes every day. And then depending on where things are breaking, you actually get an indicator or kind of a message that, look, your code either failed, which means your own code has a problem, or introducing your code failed something else. So there's a concept that we have introduced more on the application side of software, we call it business systems testing. So in today's industry, we also have several layers of testing. We have unit testing, we have system testing, we have integration testing, we have operations testing, we have UAT, and I don't know, there's 7, 8 different types of testing. We've collapsed all of that into what we call as business system testing. And we automated that completely. So the moment you introduce some code, it gets tested for all possible scenarios and use cases, and then gives you a feedback that, look, either your code is breaking or you're breaking somebody else's code. But all of that has to be automated. There's a huge amount of investment that goes into building these processes, tools, and automating those test cases. Yes. It's one of the fundamental non-negotiables of DevOps.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any more questions?
It's more about the observation of your metrics slide, what you've shown. Could you go back to your slide, please?
Yeah.
So in the metrics of change failure rate, the percentage you quoted there, it's high performance is 0 to 15, and the medium is 31 to 45. But if you see low is 16 to 30, is it?
Typo. Sorry,
Typo.
my mistake.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing it out, though.
Thank you.
I didn't gather it. It's a typo.
Thank you.
It has to be the other way around. So 16 to 13, medium, and 31, 45. Yeah.
Yeah, so my question, basically it's a general question. It's not related with any technical aspect. Why IT companies give more importance to development people as compared to the ops people?
As compared to the?
Ops people.
Compared to ops people. Very good question. I agree with the observation as well. My guess, I'll make a guess here because I haven't read any research on this per se myself, but my guess here is that when we started, say 15, 20 years ago, when operations started as a separate function, typically operations in those days was comprising only of help desk. And quite often, the folks who were supposed to staff those operations desks were not expected to be as much knowledgeable as the engineers or the functional people developing the software, right? And then over a period of time, that function started gaining a lot of importance, but the legacy still carries on with us. So I'll give you my own example. About 7, 8 years ago in the organization I was working in, I wanted to move a couple of my star performers from development to support, which is a bit similar to ops, right? And these guys raised their flags that, look, we're not going. Till I was able to explain them that, look, what they are looking at support is not just responding to a ticket, but it has much more ramifications. They then moved and then they worked wonders. So I think it is probably a legacy of where we started in terms of the knowledge gap that has still continued, while this function has actually now become as equal or at par with the development function, right? That is one part. The second is, for wrong reasons in my view, to some extent it was always thought that the value addition comes from one side, not from the other side, right? I agree, it's a wrong perception that many people, most of us have, but that was the perception, right? That, okay, these guys give features, they innovate, they bring new features, they develop things, these guys only support. Right?
But the operation team always deliver the things.
Correct.
They always face the customer.
I can't agree more. You're converting the already converted, I would say. You're trying to, or preaching to the converted, as they call it, right? So I'm with you. All I'm saying is that I'm trying to guess some of the reasons why it is like that. It should not be so, is what I would say, right? And they have to now actually work together on the same table at par, is my view. Else we can't succeed.
So
in fact, one of the things, just one last thing. One of the things we have done in our organization as a part of the DevOps journey itself is we are bringing ops into the circle by making ops a mandatory participant in requirements definition itself. Right? So there they actually become, in a way, customers to developers. Right? So that's how the circle completes itself. Go ahead.
So is there any way to change the mindset of people?
That sounds like a Sunday evening question. I can go on and on, my dear friend. If I had one, I wouldn't have taken 45 minutes or 50 minutes to explain you all these things. It would just breezed through your minds in 1 second, right? Yes. That's what I'm saying, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you have to start and you have to keep on working towards. One thing that I can certainly share, which has always worked whenever I have driven any change in my life, and I learned this from one of my trainers 15, 20 years ago. He taught me something called as YFM radio. So we are aware of Wi-Fi, we are aware of radio as well. And we are aware of FM radio also, right? So he combined these two and he made his own concept called YFM radio. YFM radio is what's in it for me. So when I started introducing DevOps in my organization, most of my team was very highly business focused. Oh, if you do DevOps, so one of the metrics we have not mentioned here, my bad actually, and I'm reminded of that from the question. DevOps will help business do this, it will help business do that, it will help us do more business, faster time to market. All of these are business metrics. There is one important metric which is people satisfaction. So as you do this, you should probably add the 8th one, which I missed out here. There is a people satisfaction usually goes higher because they're able to manage their work-life balance much better. We turned it around, and I actually had a few sessions with my own team that, look, don't sell the business side to the people, sell business side to the business. And sell people side to people as to how they would benefit. So first 2-3 months it was difficult. Then we started having success stories in the teams, which we started sharing that, look, by the way, I adopted this, I benefited like this. and then it starts. So YFM usually helps. So that's one tip that I can give you, but you keep trying. Yeah. Last one. Last question, please. Yes.
Measure these matrices, because there would be a lot of variations, like for example lead change time, right? So if it's a one-line code change versus a big change kind of a thing, and also I think there would be a lot of is there some kind of a tools mechanism by which there can be, or is it like if it's left to manual kind of measuring, then again it's subject to people interpreting it and all.
Yeah. So you had two questions. First is, what is the size of change? And second is, are there tools to measure it? The answer to the second question is yes. There are enough tools available in all the technology stacks you can measure it. You don't have to do anything manually. Size of change, usually the determinant is bring it down to what could be called as MVP, minimum viable product, or the most granular shippable feature. So if that one line of code is not a shippable feature, it's not called a change. It could be called a defect fixing or whatever. I mean, that's different, right? But change introduction is the minimum viable product or a minimum viable feature or a shippable feature, whatever you call it. And typically, how do you measure that? Typically, the expectation is that that shippable feature can be delivered by one Scrum team of about 8 to 12, give or take a couple of people here. So don't take 8 and 12 as the hard boundary lines, but typically 8 to 12 people team size, a Scrum team size, over a maximum of 2 sprints of 2 weeks each. It should not be bigger than that. If it's bigger than that, it means there is scope to reduce it further, to make it more granular. Ideally, it should be one Scrum team of 18 people delivering a shippable feature, a usable feature in one sprint of 2 weeks. Right? So it ranges from 1 to 2 sprints, one Scrum team, whatever they deliver has to be a feature. So you have to break down your feature set at that granular level. So typically that will be always fairly standard. Yeah. Great, thanks very much. I hope it was useful. And back to Niladri.
Thank you, Ketan sir, for that highly intriguing session. May I please request you to kindly stay on stage? Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to the end of this wonderful journey. A very big thank you to each and every one of you for your support and guidance that you've showed during this event. We are truly honored to have been able to host this event for you in the world of DevOps. Well, before I close this conference, may I please request the CEO and founder of Excellentro, Dr. Niladri Chaudhary, to kindly come up on stage and address the crowd with a vote of thanks and also felicitate Mr. Ketan Vanjara.